So thank you to everybody for joining. This is our February Bird's Eye View webinar. And today we're joined by Marquina, who is the head of projects at the São Tomé and Príncipe office at BirdLife International. And Marquina is going to be talking about the EcoTéla Trust Fund, which was founded on São Tomé. So Marquina, whenever you're ready, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Alice. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see so many faces, familiar faces here. Thank you really for the invitation. It is always a bit special for us to speak a bit about something that it has been more than a project, but a journey for us, which is the design and the operationalization of the EcoTéla Trust Fund. Today, I will share with all of you how we went about creating and operationalizing the CTF for São Tomé and Príncipe. Not only the technical steps, although those matter, but also what it actually looked on the ground, what it actually took on the ground for us to get where we are today. So my name is Marquinha Martins. I lead the BirdLife International Project Office in São Tomé and Príncipe, and it's a real pleasure to exchange with all of you. So please feel free to send messages and ask questions or even share your experience. So a bit of context of where we are, who are we here in São Tomé and Príncipe about this slide. Just to show you that São Tomé and Príncipe is the African second smallest country after Seychelles. We are just 1,001 kilometers square in total area, and composes these two tiny islands. The main island is São Tomé here, represented on the bottom, and then Príncipe on the top. And we have a distance between us of 150 kilometers. But as you see, it's very, very tiny. But what we lack in size, we make up for in biodiversity. These two islands are incredibly rich in endemic species, but also in ecosystem services that the island provides throughout the different forest ecosystem and gradient. So our endemism is it goes beyond terrestrial. It includes plants, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and even on marine ecosystem. It has a huge diversity, as our marine territory is vast compared to our only 1,001 kilometers square of land area, and it shelters also diverse and emblematic species such as seabirds, whales, sea turtles. Fun fact, in the world, there are 7 species of sea turtles, and all of them come to São Tomé. So this shows how important São Tomé is for conservation of species and why it's worth the title of Galapagos of Africa and also the hotspot of biodiversity. But if you will look at birds, since we are bird life, I thought, why not bring some fun facts about birds in the country? We have registered 62 land species, from which 28 are found nowhere else on the earth, and 13 of these species are globally threatened, and 4 of them are critically endangered, including our marvelous dwarf ibis, the neutral fiscal, but also the Príncipe Trust. And finally, we are the home to the world largest sunbird, which is here Daptis tomensis. Most of our biodiversity is sheltered on the high altitude forests, which in its turn is protected under the protected areas system. I have brought this map again just to show you what it looks like. We have actually 2 different protection status in the country. The first one being the national parks. We have 2 national parks, one in São Tomé here, divided into 3 spots here in the green, the North Island, the center, and the south, which encompasses the largest mangle of the country. And then the Príncipe Natural Park here in Príncipe also kind of fragmented it. The second conservation legal status that the country implements is throughout the special reserves. The special reserves are areas with high conservation values that represent rich ecosystem, but also richness and diversity of species. So we have the work that BirdLife has been implemented in São Tomé has resulted in the identification and legalization of these 21 special reserves here represented in orange, which differs from the national park in terms of management model. This is a conservation model that combine conservation with community co-management, which means that these areas can be targeted for sustainable business development like ecotourism, agroforestry that combine productivity with conservation of biodiversity. Plus, our richness and our diverse forest ecosystem has given us also the title of the second most important area for conservation of threatened birds in the country. And Príncipe Island here on the top has carried on for over 10 years now the title of Biosphere Reserve from UNESCO. And São Tomé last year has joined the Príncipe, and now the country is the only country in the world whose total area is considered the biosphere reserve. Plus, more conservation effort is underway to also legalize or create protected areas in marine ecosystem. We have now 8 marine protected areas that are currently under validation. You might say, wow, this is a lot. It's true. On paper, this sounds impressive. And in many ways, it is, because it shows the commitment of the country to its conservation, to its biodiversity, to its natural heritage. However, the islands are small, as I mentioned before. Population density is quite high, especially in São Tomé, where the main island, where there are around 200 people per kilometer square. The high population, this exponential growth in population leads to heavily dependence on the nature resources, especially for agriculture, for timber, like you see here, the example, the forest is being encroached for production of timber, for construction, production of charcoal, but also this happens because spatial planning has not always kept the pace of with development processes, and this puts more pressure under biodiversity, more stress. And it's not because people just don't care, but it's due to lack of funding, coordination, and long-term planning that has been insufficient to address these drivers of deforestation. Just as an information for you, we have carried out in 2020 an assessment to understand how much the conservation actually costs, how much the management of protected areas in the country costs, and we have estimated the financial gap for terrestrial marine protected areas in about 1 million euros per year. And even when this funding exists, it is fragmented, not always coordinated, and often it shows itself as in short-term funding, which forces the actors to adopt project-based approaches, which is not the best option because it does not ensure the continuity of the action and therefore unsustainable results and impact. That is the reality we were facing. And what BirdLife has been doing in São Tomé to address these gaps, we have identified a clear vision of our journey on where we want to go, how we are going there, and with whom. And we have structured this 10-year strategic plan, which is structured around 4 A's: address, act, advocate, and activate, each of them represented by one endemic species. And we brought it this way because for us in São Tomé, conservation is not abstract. It has a face, it has a species, and it has an habitat, which resume the work that we are doing actually. We address the gaps in biodiversity, we act for sustainable management of key biodiversity areas, we advocate for sustainable financing instruments, but also mainstreaming biodiversity across different sectors, being agriculture, construction, education, health, and we activate people by sensitizing them, raising awareness, educating, and strengthening local capacity. However, if you look back at when I was describing the key drivers of deforestation and biodiversity loss, one root cause of biodiversity loss that keeps coming up, actually two that keep coming up, were the lack of knowledge and the lack of sustainable funding. These two are the driven of all the other main drivers of deforestation. And as you can design, we can design as many best management plan in the world, but without predictable funding, it's going to remain a document. And that's where the idea of conservation trust fund actually became central. And also the reason why we BirdLife in São Tomé Príncipe has initiated the process of designing and operationalizing the conservation trust fund in the country. This picture here, I really like it because it is the picture of the launching of EcoTéla last year, and it represents the landscape of stakeholders since its highest level, the President of Republic, the UN coordinator, but also the President of EcoTéla Board of Directors and Minister of Environment. So why conservation trust funds? Why did we decided to go with conservation trust fund to address these financing gaps? Because first of all, conservation trust funds are widely recognized as one of the most robust financial mechanisms for conservation. This because they are independent legally, administratively, financially, and they can above all provide stable and predictable funding over the long term, which is what we are seeking for. And for a small island like São Tomé and Príncipe, with limited fiscal space and high vulnerability of shocks, but also fluctuation internationally, the stability is quite critical for us. However, and this is really important for us to have in mind, a conservation trust fund is not, it's not a magic. It only works. This is the lesson that we learned from other funds and international best practice. It's only work if it is built on a solid foundation. And we have been putting into place these elements that I brought here because first of all, to design a conservation trust fund, we need to define a clear conservation mandate. Is our conservation trust fund going to address terrestrial conservation, marine? Is it going to address climate issues? Is it going to address some other issues? So it's important to have this clearly defined. It's equally important to have the governance that people trust. And what is the best model? Open governance, multi-stakeholders, clear policies on management, operation, but also the definition of the strategy has to show credibility throughout the whole process. And that's why it's important, and we have practiced this throughout the process to bring together diverse expertises, being finance, law, conservation, entrepreneurship. Bringing all of these expertises into table, we are managing to remain balanced and legitimate the representation of the fund next to the donors, but also next to the local entities. The process of creating a robust CTF also needs to have expertise to support the designing, all the designing and drafting of all the institutional arrangement and financial instruments, which means that we need expertise on legal, comms, we need expertise also in advocacy, and this is really important also. Advocacy has been done following two approaches, top down and down top. Top down because it's really important to have the political will and engagement. Down to bottom up because in the São Tomé has a quite unstable political environment, which means that the decision makers are quite often changing, but guess what doesn't change? Technicians. And that's why we work with technicians as well, building their capacity, sensitizing them, and engaging them in whole process. And another aspect related to the conservation and trust fund design that was important for us was the capitalization, as it's another cornerstone of all of the structure, diversifying funding sources and clearly defining the financial windows through which the fund will allocate and mobilize resources. And of course, it's important to assess and define how the money will be allocated, how will the impact will be monitored, and how the performance also will be monitoring, including the board of directors itself and the whole governance structure. So we had this reflection on all of these, we will call it crucial elements for a conservation trust fund before starting. And we kept it in mind and adopting this best practice throughout the design of the CTF for São Tomé and Príncipe. The process has been led by BirdLife in São Tomé and Príncipe with support of Rio Impacto and funding from different actors, for example, Jeff through UNDP, the European Commission, the Cartier Foundation, and you will see that why we have so many contributors to the process, because we act on a program approach, not project, which means all the projects that we ensure in our pipeline will contribute to the materialization of the vision that we have for the country. And the process unfolded in 5 stages that are here on the left. This is again the photo of the launching event. The EcoTéla mission is quite simple, although a little bit ambitious, is to promote biodiversity conservation, strengthen the protected areas management, while supporting sustainable resource use and climate resilience. The EcoTéla it's designed to operate based in 3 main pillars. First of all, it will work to mobilize resources to different funding sources. The resources that will be mobilized will then be allocated for conservation of protected areas, the climate, to strengthen climate resilience action in the country, but also to strengthen the participation of private sectors in conservation. It has been designed following all the best guidelines and international practices. And I would say one advantage that we had is to, since the early stage, network and capitalize on experience from African Trust Fund. We managed to have contact and participate in the CAFE Network General Assembly. So legally, now I brought this slide here because it summarizes EcoTéla in only one small slide. Legally, the EcoTéla Trust Fund operates as an independent, non-governmental foundation whose governance structure includes here, it's in Portuguese, but it's okay. The governance structure it has an open governance to ensure the transparency, to ensure also the credibility, and it's composed of three social bodies, namely the General Assembly, the Fiscal Council, and the Board of Directors. Besides these, there are two advisory councils, the Patron Council, which will act as an ambassador, high-level ambassadors of the fund, but also advisory board, which will give the technical orientation over to the board of directors. And additionally, the structure has two committees, the scientific committee, actually three, the scientific and technical committee, the supervision committee, which will supervise all the process of disbursement, especially for the second modality. I will get into that. And the ethic committee, which will oversee all the issue related to ethic policies of ethic compliance with anti-corruption, anti-money laundering policies in the fund. So these are the structure. And finally, besides the governance social bodies structure, there is executive body which will implement all the strategy of the EcoTéla on the ground. It might sound a lot, but in our context, the inclusiveness was actually the key to legitimacy. And from these, the members of this governance structure were drawn from a pool of 32 members from different sectors, as I mentioned before, different backgrounds and representation. In terms of this house here represent the management entity, which will be managed by these groups here, as I mentioned. And how will it works in terms of funding? So the EcoTéla is structured around actually three funding windows. First being the endowment window. It's actually an account that allows us to receive contribution, donation, and the capital to be invested, continuously invested. The return, only the returns will then be used to finance conservation while the capital money continues to be invested. For our ambition, for the fund to meet its conservation and vision targets, there's an ambition of 1.5 million in short terms, and in long term to target 25 million euros. The second fund mobilization window will be through sinking fund. The sinking fund can support early implementation. It's a window created to absorb funding from projects with defined lifetime. So it can be actually combined with the work that BirdLife is doing in São Tomé. The third funding window will be through recurring fund window. It aims to observe financial fundings from taxes and fees based on different schemes, like, for example, ecosystem service payments for water, for example, for use of other ecosystem services, but also carbon finance, environmental fee. We are aiming to capitalize entrance fee for national parks, but also for the marine protected areas once it's created. But on this window for us, although it does not represent the most important piece of funding, it's in the other hand represent the most stable. If we manage to get two, three, or four fees continuously coming through these windows, it will fill up the operationalization of EcoTéla. The fund that will be mobilized here will then be used for conservation action through three main disbursement windows. The first disbursement window will be to support protected areas, running costs and infrastructural costs. The second will be to finance conservation actions through local NGOs project, which means EcoTéla, through its subvention committee and technical scientific committee, will launch call for proposals, select and fund projects. And finally, and this is the objective for, let's say, after 3 years of operationalization, to also invest in private sectors by making available incentive for activities that are positive to nature. Okay. So, as I mentioned before, the whole process has been structured, has been combined into these five stages. The first one, the enabling phase, was perhaps the most delicate, as we knew from the beginning that we had to demonstrate one thing above all: feasibility. Is the conservation trust fund feasible for our contest? So to do that, we started by conducting throughout legal analysis, financial analysis, and at the same time, we engaged with high-level advocacy. We organized national dialogues, and these national dialogues were organized with the aim of bringing together public authorities, private sector, civil society, development partners, and all of these participatory approach led to the creation of an interministerial committee. It's a committee that includes the representative from presidency, the Ministry of Finance, Environment, development partners, central bank, and BirdLife as the lead in the process. And that was actually a major milestone because for us, it showed political ownership from the start of the process. And they were created not only with the purpose of overseeing the EcoTéla creation, but also all the sustainable financing instruments that could potentially be implemented in the country. But of course, alignment was not enough. So we needed public to understand and support the process. To do that, in parallel of all of those actions happening, we launched a nationwide awareness campaign. And that's because perception matters. And to change perception, we organized training, we held branding consultation, and we even selection of the logo, the name, all was done throughout the public consultation. That's because if people do not understand what a trust fund is, they will not support it. So with that in mind, we started since the beginning putting people in the table on in the same room and make them understand the concept and all that's around it. Even the operational manual was actually designed with support of public inputs. After having this environment well created, we moved into design phase. The design phase for us was quite important to consolidate the concept. So we focus on developing the concept by defining and consolidating the vision, the governance structure, the funding targets, and all of these to ensure the transparency, but also independent oversight of mechanisms. As you see here, the example on the first picture, this is training dash consultation on operational guidelines for EcoTéla. So the the staff from local institutions were actually invited to provide input and recommendation on how they think the governance structure would work, having in mind the key challenges in the country, what were the best approaches. And we designed and validated the concept with the public. It was at the same time we engaged internationally by exchanging with other environmental funds. For example, CAFE, We had the opportunity to participate in Cafe General Assembly. It was an opportunity for us to learn from the best practices, to see what has been done, what has not worked well, and to avoid. It was a great deal for us. Meanwhile, we also worked on benchmarking of the best approaches against the global standard. During the implementation phase, we actually combine implementation and operationalization. We developed the core instrument documents, institutional documents. And all of these documents being the governance manual, operational manual, monitoring evaluation, communication, marketing, fundraising, capacity development, M&E, were designed aligned with international standards. And we even had a small group from BirdLife Global to also provide inputs for the concept development. So we had working group from BirdLife, working group from multi-stakeholders in the country, then a wider audience consultation. So we managed to have all the fund statutory framework, legal management entity, governance bodies elections. And in 2025, we managed to also launch the fund and have all the identity also created, as I mentioned before. Throughout the process, as you can see, the third element never changed, which is the visibility and communication. It was a transversal activity that was implemented since the beginning until the stage where we are now. And the work, although we have managed in 2025 to reach this stage, the work is not finished yet, not even close. By the end of 2026, we aim to consolidate concrete goals, being the first one, the validation by the General Assembly, which will happen in April, the validation of all the institutional documents that were developed by the General Assembly. We also will recruit the CEO, which will be responsible for implementing and build a solid secretariat team. We want to launch the endowment window, strengthen the communication fundraising, and continue building capacity of the board of directors. One recommendation that we received last year, here, if you see this picture here, it's the board of directors president intervention in international forum. He participated in the investment forum. And one of the recommendations that he received was it's important for the fund to show trust, to show impact since its initial stage. And that's why we are aiming to pilot testing disbursement mechanism so that we can invest in one action and build on that action to communicate impact. So, and besides that, so yes, the structure to finalize, the structure.
Sorry to interrupt
Someone
you.
wants to ask?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I'm just going to say, if you could just wrap up within the next couple of minutes, because we just have a couple of questions in the chat and I want to ask them before we run out of time. But sorry,
Great.
wrap up.
No, I'm actually finalizing. The real work of consolidation is actually beginning now in 2026. And if I had to leave my presentation with 2 lessons from this journey from São Tomé, that would be first, building a conservation trust fund is not just a financial exercise. It represents actually institutional reform process because it takes time, patience, resource, and above all, trust. And all of these are built slowly, sometimes quietly, which demands technical rigor, political sensitivity, and unfortunately or fortunately, there are no shortcuts. We have to go through it. Second lesson that I will take from all of this is fundraising. It can be two-headed challenge. Why? Because to attract funding, a trust fund must show impact. But to generate impact, it needs funding. So the question is, how do we break that cycle? We are putting our heads to think in an innovative way, and we are committed actually to fundraise and test run, even if it's just one investment, one project to be invested by EcoTéla, disbursed to show credibility and impact. So to finalize, we are actually very committed to this is just an example of what has been done, and we invite you to check in EcoTéla Hatch page where you can find many information, including training materials that we produced from scratch. And to finalize, we trust that our effort will be worth it. And that's because islands small like São Tomé and Príncipe, for us, sustainable conservation requires long-term commitment, and EcoTéla has the potential to become that. And one aspect for bird life is the EcoTéla Trust Fund has brought a huge visibility into bird life's role as one of key leading conservation entity in the world, but also in São Tomé and Príncipe. With that, I finalize my presentation and I look forward to your questions, which Alice will happily help me find and read out, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Markina. Sorry to rush you at the end. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. So you have a couple of questions. I don't know if you've asked a question in the chat, if you would rather read it out, but the first one that we had is from Noel. Noel, do you want me to read it out or would you like to chip in? I think it's a
Let me
few
just
actually.
Yeah, I can sort of read it out. Yeah. Thank you. That was brilliant. Really, really interesting to listen to. And recently looking at similar, was on a trip in Bolivia last couple of weeks, looking at some similar stuff. So it's really, really interesting. So yeah, and you sort of did answer it as we were going through, but I was just interested if you've been, how you learned this, came up with this, so the process and the idea, and how, so where you've learned or taken ideas to develop the initiative from other similar countries or initiatives, and then how you're sharing your ideas and results as you go along. So I know you sort of mentioned the BirdLife focal groups and CAPI and stuff, but yeah, maybe just to embellish on that a little. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I mentioned, we managed to get in contact and participate in Cafe Network, where we established contact with Portuguese-speaking countries trust funds. And we have been sharing and capitalizing on experience mainly from, for example, Mozambique Biofund, but also BioGuinea. We have our expert continuously exchanging with Cafe itself. So all of our intervention, all the lesson that we are implementing come from them. And we are now working to develop the EcoTéla website where we're gonna share all documents, all the process. For now, we are just sharing it on Hatch, LinkedIn, and Facebook. EcoTéla also has a LinkedIn page. This is how we are exchanging and sharing with different countries. We actually last week had an exchange with I forgot the country, but it's an initiative from UNDP that's starting the process of creating a CTF as well. And they asked us to share our experience. So we have been doing this process with other countries as well.
Thank you. And then we just have another question for Prashendra, which I think we still have just about enough time for. Prashendra asked, what are the main 3 tips you could give to other BirdLife partners in terms of replicating and scaling up, particularly around conservation trust funds?
First of all, is having staff allocated, and it's not a short-term process. It takes time. For BirdLife São Tomé, for example, it has been 3 years already. So first tip, having staff resource allocated to staff timing. Second would be before starting, get in touch with the São Tomé office to learn from us the process, so that you will avoid bumps in the road, especially. And the third, find a potential donor since the beginning. This has been our main challenge, and that's why the lesson of two-headed snake for fundraising. For me, these are the 3 tips for starting the Conservation Trust Fund.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, I will leave it there as we are a little bit over time, but thank you everybody very much for attending. Thank you for everybody who attended in person. Thank you, Markina, for your wonderful presentation. And if you do have any more questions, I'm sure you can email them across to Markina instead. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Markina.
Thanks, Alice. And I will be happy to exchange with all of you. You have my email and my contact. Please feel free to do so, to reach out. Thanks, and have a nice day.
Bye.